My sister got pregnant and took my room. My parents shipped me away, but 10 years later they came crawling back for my help. So, I'm 24, male now, but this all started when I was 14. My sister, Emma, 17, female at the time, now 27, has always been the golden child in our family. Our parents, Dad, 45, male, Mom, 43, female, basically worshipped the ground she walked on. But things got way worse when Emma announced she was pregnant with her loser boyfriend Tyler's 19, male, baby. You'd think my parents would be pissed, right? Nope. Mom actually hugged her and started crying about how she was going to be a young grandma, and how blessed our family was. Meanwhile, Dad just sat there, staring at his plate, not saying a word. Classic dad move. He never stands up to Mom, ever. I remember sitting there at the dinner table, literally with my mouth hanging open, like, are you kidding me? If I had told them I got some girl pregnant at 14, they'd probably have shipped me off to military school or something. But Emma? Nah, she gets a hug and congratulations. That pretty much sums up my entire childhood. Emma has always been the golden child. When I got a C in math last semester, I lost my gaming privileges for a month. When Emma failed 2 classes last year, Mom said she was going through a lot emotionally, and bought her a new phone to cheer her up. The double standards in this house are insane. I could write a freaking novel about all the times she got special treatment, but I'll spare you guys the details. And Tyler? This dude is the definition of a deadbeat. He's been fired from like 4 jobs in the past year. Last Christmas, he actually showed up with a gift for Emma that still had the security tag on it. We all pretended not to notice, but, like, come on, dude. He shows up at our house uninvited, raids our fridge, and talks to my parents like they owe him something. He's got this stupid neck tattoo that says no regrets, ironic considering his life choices, and he drives this beat-up Honda that makes our whole street smell like burning oil. The first time Tyler came over for dinner was about 3 months before the pregnancy announcement. I remember him bragging about how he doesn't believe in college because entrepreneurs don't need degrees. Meanwhile, this guy was literally working at a car wash and living in his mom's basement. But my parents just nodded along, like he was dropping wisdom or something. Dad would occasionally glance at me with this look that said, "Is this guy for real?" But he never said anything. I tried to warn my parents about Tyler one time. I overheard him on the phone in our backyard, talking about how he'd been kicked out of his previous girlfriend's place for borrowing her dad's credit card. When I told my mom, she just said, "People deserve second chances, honey." Tyler is going through a rough patch. A rough patch that apparently lasted his entire life. The thing about growing up as the less favored child is that you start to doubt yourself. For years, I wondered if I was just imagining things. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe if I was more like Emma, outgoing, popular, pretty. My parents would treat me the same way. I tried so hard to get their attention. I got good grades, mostly kept my room clean, even joined clubs I thought would impress them. Nothing worked. Emma could burn the house down, and they'd probably blame it on faulty wiring. I remember this one time when I was 12, and Emma was 15. We both had events on the same night, my science fair and her chorus concert. Guess which one my parents attended? Yep. They went to watch Emma sing one line in a group number, while I stood alone next to my project on renewable energy that had taken me weeks to complete. My teacher kept asking where my parents were, and I just said they were stuck in traffic. They didn't even bother to come by afterward. I won second place, by the way. Not that they ever knew or cared. About a week after the pregnancy announcement, Mom called a family meeting, which I knew meant bad news for me. Emma showed up 20 minutes late, as usual, whining about how her back hurt from carrying a human life. Mom immediately jumped up to get her a special pregnancy pillow while I just rolled my eyes. They made us all sit in the living room, with Mom and Dad on the big couch, Emma sprawled out on the love seat, and me stuck in that uncomfortable wooden chair from the dining room. Yeah, even the seating arrangements in our house were a metaphor for where I stood in the family hierarchy. Then they dropped the bomb. With the baby coming, they needed to rethink our living arrangements. Basically, I was being shipped off to live with my grandparents in Florida so Emma could use my room as a nursery. "It's only temporary," Mom said, not even looking me in the eye. "Emma needs our support system right now." I looked at Dad, hoping he'd say something, anything, to defend me. He just mumbled, "It'll be good for you to spend time with Grandpa and Grandma." They have that nice pool. Like a freaking pool makes up for being exiled from my own home. Emma actually had the nerve to say, "You should be grateful. At least you don't have to deal with midnight feedings and diaper smell." Then she laughed and added, "Plus, I've always wanted your room. It gets better sunlight for the baby." I remember just sitting there, completely stunned. They were discussing my entire future like I wasn't even in the room, like I was some piece of furniture they could just relocate when it became inconvenient. I kept waiting for someone to say, "Just kidding," or offer some alternative, but it never came. "When exactly am I supposed to leave?" I finally asked, my voice cracking embarrassingly. "Well," Mom said, checking her calendar on her phone. "Grandma and Grandpa said you could come any time, but we thought maybe after the school year ends. That gives you about 6 weeks to say goodbye to your friends." 6 weeks, like that was some generous time frame to completely uproot my life. I had lived in our town my entire life. All my friends were here. My school, my teachers, the comic book store where I hung out on weekends, the park where I was just starting to get decent at skateboarding. Everything I knew was here. "Do I get any say in this?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Honey," Mom said with that fake sympathy voice she uses when she's pretending to care, "sometimes families have to make tough decisions. This is what's best for everyone. Everyone except me," I muttered. "Don't be so dramatic," Emma said, rolling her eyes. "It's not like being sent to prison. Florida has beaches and stuff." I still remember the exact moment when I realized I was completely disposable to my family. It was when my mom started talking about how they'd repaint my room, which I'd just gotten to paint dark blue last year after begging for ages, to a nice sunny yellow for the baby. She was already planning which of my posters would come down and where the crib would go, all while I was sitting right there. "But what about my school, my friends, the soccer team tryouts?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from cracking. "You'll make new friends," Mom said dismissively. "And Florida schools are probably better anyway." I looked at Emma, hoping for at least some sign that she felt bad about this whole situation. She was texting someone, not even paying attention to the conversation that was literally changing my entire life. When she finally looked up, she just said, "Can we wrap this up? I'm meeting Tyler for dinner." That night, I locked myself in my room and cried for the first time in years. Not that anyone noticed or cared. The next few weeks were hell. Emma started moving baby stuff into my room before I even packed. She and Mom went on a shopping spree for baby clothes, while I was told we needed to budget when I asked for new sneakers for Florida. One day, I came home from school and found my bookshelf had been emptied, with all my books shoved into cardboard boxes in the hallway. When I asked what was going on, Mom said, "Oh, we need the shelf for the baby's things. You weren't taking those books to Florida anyway, right? We'll store them in the attic." Those books were my escape. I'd saved up for years, buying them at garage sales and from the used bookstore downtown. Some had notes in the margins, little thoughts I'd had while reading, and now they were just being packed away like they meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. Tyler started hanging around more too, acting like he owned our house. One day, I caught him wearing my favorite Bulls hoodie. When I called him out, he just shrugged and said, "Chill, little man. You won't need warm clothes in Florida anyway." I wanted to punch him so bad. The worst part was that my mom saw this happen and said nothing. Actually, that's not true. She told me to stop making a scene when I demanded my hoodie back. Tyler just smirked behind her back. I never got that hoodie back, by the way. I bet he sold it or lost it somewhere. Things just kept getting worse. My mom and Emma started having these conversations about the baby right in front of me, like I was invisible. They'd talk about how they'd convert my desk area into a changing station, or how they'd need to get rid of my bed to make room for the crib, just completely erasing any trace that I had ever existed in that space. I tried to talk to my friends about what was happening, but they didn't really get it. Most of them thought moving to Florida sounded cool. "Dude, you'll live right by the beach, or maybe you'll see an alligator." They didn't understand that I was basically being kicked out of my own family. My best friend, Alex, was the only one who seemed to really get how messed up it was. "That's some serious bullshit, man," he said when I told him. "They can't just ship you off because your sister got knocked up. That's not your fault." It felt good to have someone validate what I was feeling, but it didn't change anything. I was still being sent away, and nobody who could actually do anything about it seemed to care. I tried talking to Dad alone one night, when he was in the garage organizing his tools. "Dad, this isn't fair." Why do I have to leave? Why can't Emma and Tyler get their own place? Dad just sighed and looked tired. Sometimes in families we have to make sacrifices. Your mom thinks this is best for everyone. But what do you think? I pushed. He just shook his head. What I think doesn't matter much around here, son, you know that. I saw something in his eyes that night, this defeated look that made me realize he'd given up fighting my mom years ago, maybe before I was even born. It was like looking at my future if I stayed in this toxic environment, and it scared the hell out of me. I tried one last-ditch effort to stay. I went to my guidance counselor at school and explained the situation, hoping maybe she could talk to my parents or something. She seemed concerned and called them in for a meeting, but, of course, my mom just put on her perfect parent act, talking about how this was a wonderful opportunity for me to bond with my grandparents, and how they were making this sacrifice as a family. The counselor bought it completely. As we were leaving her office, Mom squeezed my shoulder so hard it hurt and whispered, "Don't ever try to embarrass this family again." The final straw was overhearing Emma on the phone with her friend. She was laughing and saying, "Yeah, it's perfect. The brat is getting shipped off, so the baby gets a whole nursery. Mom already promised to help with night feedings, so I can still hang out sometimes." That's when I knew I was just an inconvenience to them, a problem they could solve by sending me away. To Emma, I wasn't a brother who was having his life uprooted. I was just the brat who was in the way of her perfect little setup. The day before I left, I decided to go see my old treehouse in the woods behind our neighborhood. My dad and I had built it when I was 7, one of the few times he'd actually spent real quality time with me. It was nothing fancy, just some plywood and 2x4s, but it had been my special place for years. I hadn't been up there in a while, had kind of outgrown it, but suddenly it seemed important to go there one last time. When I got there, I found that someone had pulled down the ladder and spray-painted "Tyler was here" across the front. The small window was broken, and there were beer cans and cigarette butts inside. I sat there for hours, just staring at this symbol of my childhood, that had been invaded and ruined, just like everything else in my life. My last night at home, nobody even made a special dinner or anything. Mom was busy helping Emma register for baby gifts online. Dad watched TV in silence. I ordered a pizza with my own money and ate it alone in my nearly empty room, sitting on the floor since my bed had already been disassembled to make room for the crib that had been delivered that morning. So, I moved to Florida to live with my grandparents when I was 14, right before starting high school. Living with Grandma, 68 female, and Grandpa, 70 male, wasn't terrible. They treated me way better than my own parents did. But starting high school in a new state where I knew literally nobody sucked majorly. I was the new kid with the weird accent. Apparently, I have a northern accent in Florida. My first day at school, some kid asked where I was from and why I'd moved. When I explained that my pregnant sister needed my room, he looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Dude, that's messed up," he said. It was the first time anyone had validated that what happened to me wasn't normal or okay. I nearly cried right there in the cafeteria. The first month was rough. I kept to myself, mostly eating lunch alone and coming straight home after school. Grandma would have snacks ready and actually ask about my day, not just a generic "how was school?" but specific questions about my classes and teachers. It was weird having an adult actually interested in my life. One afternoon, I completely broke down while doing homework at the kitchen table, just started sobbing out of nowhere. Grandma sat with me, not saying anything, just rubbing my back until I could breathe again. Then she said something I'll never forget. "What your parents did wasn't right, and you're allowed to be angry about it. But don't let that anger burn up everything good inside you." Grandpa was cool too. He had this workshop in the garage where he built furniture, and he started teaching me how to use the tools. He said I had good hands for detailed work. It was the first time anyone had ever complimented me on being good at something physical. Dad had never bothered to teach me that kind of stuff. The first time I built something on my own, a simple wooden box with dovetail joints, Grandpa displayed it on the mantel like it was some priceless artifact. He showed it to everyone who came over, bragging about how his grandson had made it. I pretended to be embarrassed, but, honestly, it felt amazing to have someone proud of me. I barely heard from my family back home. Mom would call like once a month with awkward small talk, then spend 20 minutes showing me pictures of Emma's baby girl, Olivia, through FaceTime. Dad would get on for a minute at the end, just to say, "Be good for your grandparents," before hanging up. Emma never called or texted unless she needed something. The first time Emma called me directly was about 3 months after I moved. I was actually excited to see her name on my phone. Maybe she missed me. Nope. She wanted me to convince Grandma and Grandpa to send a bigger check for the baby's christening gift. I hung up on her. For my 15th birthday, my parents sent a card that arrived 3 days late. Inside was a $25 iTunes gift card and a generic message. Not even a "we miss you." Grandma and Grandpa, on the other hand, threw me an actual party with a homemade cake and took me to pick out a decent laptop for school. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Slowly, I started to adapt to my new life. I joined the computer club at school, where I met some decent people who didn't care that I was the new kid. One guy, Marcus, lived in my grandparents' neighborhood, and we started hanging out. His parents were divorced, and he split time between households, so he kind of understood what it was like to be caught in the middle of family drama. I discovered I was actually pretty good with computers. My new laptop became my obsession. I taught myself basic programming, how to troubleshoot hardware issues, even a little graphic design. Grandpa noticed my interest and started bringing home broken electronics from yard sales for me to tinker with. "Either you'll fix it, or it was already broken, so no harm done," he'd say with a wink. I worked hard in school, got straight A's, joined a computer club, and got a part-time job at the local Best Buy when I turned 16. Grandpa taught me about saving money and investing. I put away every cent I could. I had this plan forming, a way to never be dependent on my parents again, to never be in a position where they could just dispose of me when I became inconvenient. Working at Best Buy was a game changer. Not only did I make decent money, but I learned a ton about different tech and how to talk to customers. My manager, Rick, took me under his wing and started giving me the more challenging repair jobs. "Kid's got a knack for finding the problem," he'd tell the other employees. For the first time, I felt valued for my skills. By junior year, I had actually made some good friends, joined the track team, and started dating this girl named Melissa. She moved to California for college, but we're still friends. Life was normal. Sometimes I'd go weeks without even thinking about my parents or Emma. The pain never completely went away, but it faded from a sharp stab to a dull ache. I did go back home once during my junior year. It was for Thanksgiving, and Grandma insisted we should all be together for the holiday. That visit was eye-opening. My old room was completely transformed, pink walls, crib, changing table. No sign that I had ever lived there. Emma was living at home with Olivia, who was a toddler by then. Tyler was between jobs as usual, and played video games the whole time I was there. The weirdest part was how they all acted like nothing had happened. Like me being sent away was just some normal thing that families did. Mom kept saying things like, "Oh, we should show you the mall they've renovated since you lived here," as if I'd just been away at camp or something. Dad was a little better. He actually apologized one night when we were alone, saying he should have handled things differently. But it was too little, too late. I couldn't wait to get back to Florida after that visit. It made me realize that my grandparents' house had become more of a home than my parents' house had ever been. When I graduated high school at 18, my parents flew down for the ceremony. It was awkward as hell. They acted like the past 4 years hadn't happened. Mom kept showing my grandparents' neighbors pictures of Olivia, now 4, and talking about how Emma was such an amazing young mother despite all her challenges. Challenges meaning the consequences of her own choices, by the way. Like how Tyler moved out when Olivia was 6 months old, then moved back in, then moved out again, a pattern he'd repeat about a dozen times over the years. Or how she'd gotten fired from 3 different retail jobs for always calling in sick, translation hungover. But in my mom's eyes, Emma was still this poor, struggling angel who deserved endless support and praise for doing the basic parenting that millions of people do every day. At the graduation dinner, I announced I wasn't coming back home. I was staying in Florida, getting my own place, and starting my own computer repair business. Mom seemed shocked. Dad just nodded, like he knew this was coming all along. "But don't you want to come home?" Mom asked, genuinely confused. "Your room is still there." It wasn't my room anymore, it was Olivia's room, as I'd seen in the background of countless video calls. "No," I said simply. "My home is here now." The hurt look on her face almost made me laugh. What did she expect? That I'd be eager to return to the place where I'd been tossed aside like old furniture? That I'd want to live as a guest in what used to be my home? Grandpa pulled me aside later that night and pressed something into my hand, a check for $5,000. Seed money, he called it, for your business. Don't tell your grandmother, she thinks we're just helping with first month's rent on your apartment. He winked at me and added, I believe in you, kid. That night, I realized something important. Family isn't just blood, it's the people who make room for you in their lives, who see your value, who believe in you. By that definition, my grandparents were more family to me than my parents and sister had ever been. From ages 18 to 24 now, I built my computer repair business from nothing into a decent IT consulting company. I have my own condo, a new car, and actual savings. Not rich by any means, but stable and independent. Those first couple of years on my own were tough. I lived in this tiny studio apartment that smelled like the Indian restaurant downstairs. I worked insane hours, doing repairs during the day, taking online classes to get certified in different systems at night, cold calling businesses to offer my services on weekends. Ramen became a food group. Sleep became optional. At first I was just fixing people's personal computers, removing viruses, upgrading hardware, retrieving lost data. I charged less than the big repair shops, so I got a lot of business through word of mouth. I'd make house calls with my toolkit in my backpack, riding my bike because I couldn't afford a car yet. My big break came when I helped the owner of a local accounting firm recover data from what they thought was a fried server. They'd been quoted thousands by a big IT company for the job. I fixed it in an afternoon for a few $100. The owner was so impressed he hired me on a monthly retainer to manage all their IT needs. That was my first real business contract. Slowly, things started coming together. Word of mouth spread. One satisfied customer would recommend me to another. I hired my first employee at 20, this community college kid who knew his way around networks. By 22, I had an actual office space with 3 employees. Now, I have a team of 5, including a full-time office manager who handles all the stuff I hate dealing with. The best part of building my own business wasn't even the money, it was the control. For the first time in my life, I was making my own decisions, setting my own rules. Nobody could ship me off, or take my room away, or tell me I didn't matter. I was building something that was completely mine. Meanwhile, from the little I heard, Emma, now 27, was still living at home with Olivia, now 10. She dropped out of community college after 1 semester because it was too much with a child. Tyler had been in and out of their lives, mostly borrowing money and disappearing for months at a time. Every now and then, I'd get updates via holiday cards or the occasional call from Dad. Apparently, Tyler got another girl pregnant when Olivia was 3, which caused drama for a while. Then he went to jail for a few months, for driving on a suspended license with an unregistered gun in the car. Quality guy, that Tyler. Emma had this pattern of getting jobs and quitting or getting fired within a few months. Retail, waitressing, receptionist, nothing ever stuck. She always had excuses. The manager was mean, the hours were too long, the customers were rude. But from what I could tell from Dad's careful comments, the real issue was that she just didn't want to work. Why should she when my parents were there to bail her out? On Olivia's 7th birthday, I sent her a tablet preloaded with educational games and ebooks. It was probably more expensive than I should have spent, but I wanted her to have something really nice. A few days later, I got a text from Emma with a photo of Olivia holding the tablet. But the message was just, she says thanks for the iPad. It wasn't even an iPad, but whatever. No personal thank you from Emma. No acknowledgement of the effort I'd made to pick out age-appropriate content. Just the bare minimum. I tried not to let it bother me, but it did. Not because I wanted gratitude, but because it showed that nothing had changed. Emma was still the same selfish person she'd always been, and my parents were still enabling her behavior. My parents, now 53, female, and 55, male, were basically raising Olivia, while Emma worked part-time at a nail salon and went out with friends. Mom was still making excuses for her, calling her a young, free spirit who needed time to find herself. Dad sounded more and more tired on the rare occasions when we talked. The last time we had a real conversation, Dad mentioned that he was pushing back his retirement because they were still helping Emma get on her feet. He was 55 then, with back problems and high blood pressure, should have been thinking about winding down his career, not supporting his almost 30-year-old daughter and granddaughter. I kept in minimal contact. Christmas cards, birthday texts, that's it. I sent Olivia birthday and Christmas gifts each year, usually books or educational toys. I'd never met her in person, which was weird to think about. I had a niece I'd only seen through screens. Grandma and Grandpa were still my real support system. They never made me feel like a burden or an afterthought. Grandpa passed 2 years ago, heart attack, peaceful in his sleep. And that hit me hard, harder than anything I'd felt about my immediate family in years. I still call Grandma twice a week and visit for Sunday dinner whenever I can. The day of Grandpa's funeral was one of the worst days of my life. My parents came down, but Emma didn't. She claimed she couldn't find a sitter for Olivia, which was bullshit because my parents could have watched her. The truth was, she just didn't want to make the effort. My grandpa, who had basically saved me when my own family threw me away, wasn't worth a 6-hour drive to her. At the funeral, my mom tried to make it about her somehow, crying dramatically and telling everyone how her father had been such a wonderful man, as if she hadn't barely called him or visited over the past decade. Dad, at least, seemed genuinely sad and helped a lot with the practical arrangements, which I appreciated. After the funeral, I overheard Mom telling one of Grandma's friends that they were so worried about how I was coping with the loss, and how they'd offered to have me come stay with them for a while, which was a complete lie. They'd done nothing of the sort. That was Mom for you, always performing for an audience. On my 23rd birthday, I got a text from Emma that just said, "Happy B-Day, bro," no capitalization, not even my name. I hadn't heard from her directly in over a year. About an hour later, she sent another text, asking if I could loan her $800 for car repairs. I ignored it. She sent 3 more messages over the next week, each getting progressively more guilt-trippy, until the final one accused me of abandoning the family and not caring about my niece's safety since she needed a reliable car to drive Olivia to school. I finally responded with, "Ask Tyler or Mom and Dad. They're your support system, remember?" She didn't text again after that. That's the thing about people like Emma, they only remember you exist when they need something from you. 10 years of basically no contact, and suddenly I'm supposed to hand over money because we're family. The audacity was almost impressive. Meanwhile, I was building a life I was proud of. My business was growing steadily. I had good friends, dated occasionally. Nothing serious, but not for lack of trying. I was happy, genuinely happy, in a way I never had been growing up. Sometimes I think about the parallel universe where my parents had stood up to Emma, where they'd made her and Tyler figure out their own living situation instead of shipping me off. Would I be the same person? Would I have built the same life? It's impossible to know, of course, but part of me thinks that being forced to rely on myself at such a young age made me stronger, more determined. It's not a silver lining I would wish on anyone else, but it's something I've made peace with. Then, out of nowhere, my phone rang with Mom's number on a Tuesday afternoon. I almost didn't answer but figured it might be important. "Your sister was in a car accident," Mom said, her voice shaking. "She's okay, but she broke her leg in 3 places and fractured her hip. The doctors say she can't work for at least 6 to 8 months. I waited, knowing there was more coming. And Tyler left for good. He said he couldn't handle the pressure and moved to California with some girl he met online. We're struggling with the medical bills and taking care of Olivia. Your father's hours got cut back at work, and my arthritis is getting worse." Her voice trailed off before she finally said what she was calling for. "We were hoping maybe you could come visit, reconnect with the family, meet Olivia properly. Your father really misses you." Translation: the golden child is down for the count, her deadbeat baby daddy is gone for good, and they suddenly remembered they have another kid who might be useful. I sat there for a long time after hanging up, just staring at my phone. 10 years. It had taken 10 years and a financial crisis for them to reach out in any meaningful way. Not because they missed me or regretted what they'd done, but because they needed something from me. Part of me wanted to ignore the call, but then I thought about Olivia, a 10-year-old kid caught in the middle of all this adult dysfunction. None of this was her fault. And if I'm being completely honest, a tiny part of me wanted them to see what I'd become without them. I wanted them to know that the kid they'd tossed aside had built a life they now needed to turn to for help. So I called Mom back and said I'd come visit in a few weeks. I booked a hotel rather than staying at their house. No way was I sleeping on their couch, or in what used to be my room. Walking into my old house was weird. Family photos lined the walls, mostly Olivia at different ages with Emma and my parents. I noticed there were only 2 photos of me, my high school graduation, and 1 ancient school picture, from when I was about 12. My old bedroom was now a princess-themed kids' room with pink walls and unicorn bedding. Emma was on the couch, leg in a cast, scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up when I walked in. "Oh, you actually came," she said, like she was surprised I could be bothered. Mom hovered around nervously while Dad hugged me tight and whispered, "I've missed you," in my ear. He looks so much older, so beaten down. When Olivia came home from school, everything changed. She was bright and curious, with none of Emma's attitude. After a shy start, she lit up when she found out I worked with computers and bombarded me with questions about coding and games. That night, after Olivia went to bed, they finally got to the point. They were drowning in medical bills. Emma couldn't work, Tyler was gone, they were behind on the mortgage and Olivia's private school tuition. "We know it's a lot to ask," Mom said, "but you're doing so well with your business. We were hoping you might be able to help us out." Emma finally looked interested in my existence. "Yeah, bro, must be nice having all that freedom and money." I looked around at all of them. My entitled sister who never faced consequences, my enabling mother who always put her first, and my passive father who never stood up for me but at least seemed genuinely sorry. "I'll help," I finally said. Mom burst into tears of relief. "But I have conditions," I continued. "I'm not giving anybody a blank check. I'll pay for Olivia's basic expenses and medical bills directly to the providers, not to any of you, and the money goes through Dad, not either of you," I said, looking at Mom and Emma. Emma's smile vanished. "What, you don't trust us or something?" "No, actually I don't." Mom looked offended, but Dad just nodded, understanding completely. "That's fair," Dad said. "You have no reason to trust us." I also insisted Emma enroll in job training once she was physically able. She stormed out, but Dad surprised me by agreeing it was more than fair. As I walked out to my car that night, Dad followed me. "I should have stood up for you back then," he said quietly. "It was easier to just go along with your mother and Emma. I've regretted it every day since you left." I just nodded. I wasn't ready to forgive him yet, but I appreciated the acknowledgement. "Take care of Olivia," I said. "She deserves better than all this drama." As I drove back to my hotel, I realized I didn't hate them anymore. I just felt sorry for them. They'd created this mess with their favoritism and enabling, and now they were living in it. Meanwhile, I was free. The forgotten son who built himself from nothing. Maybe someday I'd have a real relationship with Olivia. Maybe even with Dad. But for now, them finally acknowledging they needed me, after years of making me feel worthless, that was enough. Edit. Wow, thanks for all the awards and comments. To clear up the timeline, I'm 24 now. I was 14 when I got sent to Florida. Emma was 17 when she got pregnant, and now she's 27 with a 10-year-old daughter. Edit 2. Some people are asking for updates. Yes, I'm still helping with Olivia's expenses, but only through my dad. Emma is still not working, even though doctors cleared her months ago. She's been looking into online classes for like 6 months now. My mom still makes excuses for her. The good news is that I'm developing a relationship with Olivia. We video chat once a week and talk about books and coding. She's really smart, and I'm trying to be the person I needed when I was her age. Edit 3. To the people saying I should just cut them all off completely, I get where you're coming from, believe me. But Olivia is innocent in all this, and I don't want to punish her for her mom's mistakes. And no, I didn't move back. I visit occasionally to see Olivia and Dad, but my life is in Florida now. Edit 4. Thanks for all the kind comments and messages. This blew up way more than I expected. To those asking if I'd take Olivia if something happened to my parents, in a heartbeat. She deserves a chance at a normal life. To everyone sharing similar stories, I'm sorry you went through that, and I hope you found peace like I'm trying to. Edit 5. Last update because this is getting huge. A lot of you are asking if my grandma knows I'm helping my parents financially. Yes, she knows, and she supports my decision to help Olivia, though she has choice words about my sister that I won't repeat here. Grandma is a wise woman who taught me that sometimes being the bigger person doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. It means setting boundaries while still doing the right thing. Miss you, Grandpa. Wish you could see the man I've become.